I believe this is our last one.
It is.
Everybody's gonna miss coming to downtown Richmond. And we'll see, but, we'll just go right ahead in the agenda. If we were gonna do the roll call.
So from TEQ, we have Alexander Stanford.
Yes, we
Yep.
can.
Okay, sorry about that. It worked fine on the morning meeting, but apparently.
All right. Let's roll call. I think we had some additions from the initial roll call. Wheeler. We've got Wendy, Virginia Tech,
Okay,
and we've got
Jess Whitehead
Jess
on,
White,
online.
and we've got Ian. I think you got Ian.
I got Ian. Yeah.
I guess those that just joined online, in the room, we have Lyle from VIMS, Wendy from Virginia Tech, Rebecca from Northern Virginia, Mike from VRTC, and Ben from HRPDC, as well as Dave Davis from DEQ. All right, we're gonna move on to adoption of the agenda. Just quickly on the agenda, we moved the public comment period up in front of new business, so that if there is any public comment, that those would be considered before the members cast their vote on the subcommittee recommendations. So that's really the only change in the agenda. Ready for adoption.
Can we have a motion? Second. All those in favor? Nay?
All right, and then it's adopted. Now adoption of the meeting minutes.
Have a motion to adopt the minutes? Yeah. Second,
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
All right, adopted. Very good. So before we get into the subcommittee business, just want to first retouch about what are we doing here with the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Plan and what is this plan document? It is meant to be a trusted resource to help local government, regional government entities in making more evidence-based decisions related to severe and repetitive flooding. The planning area includes all 8 coastal PDCs and the jurisdictions that they represent. Within the plan, 2 of the key components that we're working on is a unified baseline of analysis, not only of existing conditions, but also looking forward into the future, where flooding can be from the rain, from our rivers, and from our coast, including sea level rise and changing in precipitation patterns. And then looking at the impacts of that flooding on our built and natural environment, so that we can better plan to manage and mitigate some of the risks. We're also working to coordinate the different resilience actions that are either underway, have been completed, planned, or are needed across this area, so that we can better coordinate on some of those different resilience actions, try to scale them up where appropriate, leverage successes from others, as well as learn from some of the challenges across the region, so we can move forward together. This plan is due out at the end of this calendar year, and then we are scheduled to repeat this process every 5 years. So the next edition of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan will be scheduled for release no later than the end of 2029. Any questions on the master plan itself? All right, so just moving into our objectives for the Research, Data, and Innovation Subcommittee. This subcommittee, 1 of 4, is charged with informing the development of our flood hazard exposure model, making sure we're using the best available data that's available to inform where flooding can be. Also informing on inputs into our flood risk assessment. And so understanding not only the assets that we're looking at, but how we're measuring impacts and how those impact analysis is conducted. And then the third objective of this subcommittee, which we're focusing on today is developing recommendations for future planning. And those recommendations are for both DCR, the Office of Resilience Planning, on what we can be doing in the interim throughout the planning cycle, as well as improving the planning process, but also for other responsible parties to make recommendations for action that can occur to help make the Commonwealth and the coastal region more flood resilient. There's a quick overview of our schedule as a subcommittee. This is our 6th and final meeting of the subcommittee. And today's objective primarily focuses on finalizing the subcommittee's 5 recommendations. So that if they vote all 5 out, we'll be able to present them in front of the full TAC next month. Any questions? I really don't have any updates on the Coastal Resilience Master Plan for the subcommittee today. The flood hazard work has been completed. The impacts analysis has been completed. We're working with our contractors to tell the story with that information, put that story into the plan and share it. In addition to the plan, we are updating our Coastal Resilience Web Explorer that will have more data available, more impacts, all of the projects, and it's interactive, so you can choose your own adventure on what you want to look at and where. And then also, we will have all of the underlying data available, all of our pluvial models. The actual models themselves are available for download and use, as well as all the other data that was helped generate the information in this plan is available for others to use and try to help inform their planning process. So looking forward to releasing it at the end of this calendar year. Any questions on kind of the status of the plan? Okay, I'm gonna hand it over to Linda. As I do it, I got a message from Karen McLaughlin. She will be joining us. I just need to send her the registration. So I'm gonna hand it over to Linda, who will be facilitating the recommendations.
Welcome. Thanks for being here. So we have a healthy amount of time to go through and work with each of the recommendations. I think it's the next slide. In terms of the process, we have developed them. And now we're going to have about a 20-minute discussion for each of the 5 recommendations. There's no priority to them. There are just 5 of them, A through E. And then just as we talked about in TAC, we will go over any suggestions or considerations that came up during the larger TAC meeting. And then you all get to decide how you want to rephrase things if you need to rephrase. So anyone who is online with us, please feel free. Please definitely unmute, say yes, no, I'm thinking about this. If you don't have an exact way to rephrase as we're doing it, just say, something's not quite sitting right with me, and then we can talk about it together. So we'll get to a very good end result for the recommendations themselves. In addition to those, we also have the purpose when we're showing it on the screen. We're not voting today on the purpose, but the purpose will be there next to the recommendation in the report. So you want to make sure that the purpose is phrased the way you want it to be. What we'll do in a minute, we're going to look at each recommendation, just kind of all 5 of them. I'll read them out loud. Then we'll go back, wordsmith one at a time. When we're done going through all 5, we'll go back one more time and just look through, making sure we don't want any changes. We'll have enough time for it. And then there'll be the public comment period. And then after that, I'll turn it back over to Wheeler, who will give it to Dave as our chairperson today. And then Dave will call the actual voting. We're going to use something called Mentimeter. It's very easy to use. You'll need to use your cell phone to use it, but we'll explain how at the end. And with that process, you will complete the 5 different recommendations from our subcommittee today. They will go on to the TAC meeting. You are the 4th subcommittee of 4 subcommittees to go through this process. So everybody else tested it out for you and it should work out quite well today. Except that the owls decided to
Clearly.
rebel. Any questions on this process? Okay.
Just
Yeah.
one note, Troy isn't able to join us today from Virginia Sea Grant. They have their symposium today and tomorrow. But he did submit some written comments for each recommendation. So as we go through them, I will read those out so that you can all hear Troy's input on the recommendations.
Wonderful. Okay, ready? We're ready. So we will start. We're going to start with recommendation A. And for those who are online, you should have received in the email invite from Matt, you will have received a copy of this particular document. It shows what Sydney's screen sharing right now is showing the recommendation, and she'll be using track changes so we can watch as these different considerations you all have are coming to fruition. But you also have a document we've handed out in person, and hopefully you have it online. And that document shows the recommendation the way we had it when we were together at the TAC meeting. And then it also shows any comments if TAC discussion happened. We have it very easy in this case. There were no comments on this particular recommendation during the TAC meeting. Were there some comments from Troy on this one, Matt?
There are.
Okay.
So Troy had his first comment was on the use of the word coordinate. That state agencies and the Commonwealth research universities should coordinate. Troy notes that the original recommendation used the verb support multi-institutional efforts to, which is less authoritative than coordinate. Universities cannot be coordinated, but they can share information, collaborate on individual projects, and over time, this may build greater coordination, but we cannot start there, particularly without providing significant financial incentives. Maybe able to find a middle ground, support the coordination of the collection and share.
Okay, great. So we're thinking about supporting coordination. And as we go through these, make sure that the subject that starts the sentence, in this case, it's state agencies and the Commonwealth's research universities, make sure that that is the correct entity, if you will, to carry this out. And we are hoping to be consistent. There will be probably 20 recommendations across the 4 subcommittees. And so consistency, for consistency purposes, we might bring up how other ones have begun, and we can suggest those to you. So some of the ways that other recommendations have been phrased. Ben, do you happen to have, or anyone from what we just completed? In terms of the initial,
and
yes.
stuff, so we used some of the phrasing we've used for the other recommendations that to have the chief resilience officer request the interagency resilience management team to do something. So they're in the state code. The language says that the CRO can ask for information from the interagency regional resilience management team. I don't know if that would be, I don't know, the universities aren't part of the IRFT, so that's a arrangement.
Yes.
And so it might be different here. And then some of the other ways have been phrased, the DCR Office of Resilience Planning should work with. The Chief Resilience Officer should coordinate state agencies to, state agencies should, and the Commonwealth should establish. So those just give you some ideas of how it can begin. So with that, what are your thoughts about this one? And does this meet the needs for what you're thinking its purpose should be?
Nobody has any other comments. Troy did have another comment on the inventories of data usage and decision-making applications, which is kind of another second part of the recommendation there. His comment is, what is this? Are we suggesting we need a set of case studies of how data were used? Are we saying we need an inventory of all existing data sets? Are we saying we want agencies, PDCs, universities to post their resilience data in a shared space? There will be a lot of devil in the details with these data sharing interests. And there are communities that have tackled this in the past and have sophisticated broad community data sharing protocols that we could leverage, for example, in oceanography.
So now that we've talked through some of these pieces, I recognize we haven't read each of the recommendations yet. So just to orient everyone, I'm going to go through and read each of these out loud to you, just to give you a sense of what are all five. Okay, so I'll start with this first one. State agencies and the Commonwealth's research universities should coordinate the collection and sharing of quantitative and qualitative flood resilience data, data production efforts, and inventories of data usage in decision-making applications across state agencies, planning district commissions, and the Commonwealth's research university. Recommendation B. The DCR Office of Resilience Planning and other state agencies should determine and adopt programmatic responsibility for acquiring, developing, processing, analyzing, updating, and managing critical temporal flood resilience data needs to support ongoing planning and decision-making. The third one. The Flood Resilience Advisory Committee should define resilient success, while the Commonwealth's research universities should identify and develop indicators and monitoring methods to assess the performance of resilience projects with key and relevant stakeholders, entities, NGOs, etc. The indicators should be based on Virginia-centric data and address ecological, infrastructure, social, economic, cultural, and environmental justice performance. And fourth, DCR's Office of Resilience Planning should engage with local government stakeholders to understand local obstacles and gaps in state-level programs and develop a statewide strategy that leverages co-production of innovative state-level solutions to meet local needs. And the fifth one, the Commonwealth research universities should convene to evaluate the performance of existing and innovative nature-based solutions for water quantity and water quality protections through use-inspired collaborations with public, including other universities, and private partners, and establish working groups to track progress, adapt approaches, and identify funding sources for continued collaborative efforts. So we'll go back to that first one. And what we found in going through all these, sometimes we make two sentences if there's just too much together, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be one sentence. And in some cases, all of the detail that's in there, sometimes that detail was kept because it was determined to be important. Sometimes it was summarized in one or two words to make it more direct. Okay. So, what are your thoughts? And we'll consider some of Troy's changes too.
I'll just jump in. I like for specificity in some of the other recommendations, the open-endedness of state agencies makes me think that we're all going to sit around and wait to see who raises their hand. So, just a thought.
So what would you suggest?
It could be the CRO, it could be the Office of Resiliency Planning. I'm not wedded to, identifying who. I just think there should be a little more specificity.
I think that's why we put in the other groups we're having the CRO suggesting an action by the CRO to initiate these conversations. So maybe in this case, we could have something like the Chief Resilience Officer should request from the Commonwealth's research universities and the interagency resilience management team information on current and planned collection and sharing of.
We're gonna start with the universities. Commonwealth's research universities and the team. Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that says that they can't ask any information. The code section really just implies or says that the agencies will advise the CRO.
Yeah.
So, but we can still think it'll ask for information from the university.
Does that feel a little repetitive towards the end, though, when you're saying that it's been across the state agencies and the research universities again? So I don't even know if you need that first part where.
Well, I was gonna suggest that we get rid of everything after.
One or the other.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, so should, okay, the request. From the, blah, 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 from the team, the status or information on the current and planned collection and sharing of quantitative and qualitative flood resilience data and data production efforts, and just leave it at that.
Yeah,
The status or information on,
Both of those, status and information.
and, so put status before information.
Okay.
Status and information on,
Status of an information.
status of and information, okay? And so, in this way, you're honing in on exactly who's doing it. You have the chief resilience officer. So the chief resilience officer to request from the Commonwealth research universities and the interagency resilience management team the status of and information on. Okay, the collection and sharing of quantitative and qualitative flood resilience data, data production efforts, and inventories of data usage and decision-making applications across state agencies, planning district commissions, and the Commonwealth Research University. So you're saying who? The action there?
But at this point, this means that the action is no longer to actually do any of it. It's just the chief resilience officer will request the status. So the CRO might send out an email to the university directors and say, hey, how are we doing on information? And we could say, well, compared to all of these other states who are doing all of these other things, Virginia is not doing this. And the chief resilience officer could say, okay, cool, we're all right with that, and leave it. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with watering this down further and getting away from the aspiration of actually acting on this and just moving back to appearing to act on it.
Is your issue the request for? I could see that being changed to maybe coordinate.
Yeah, I mean, it's more the status of and information on. I could give you a white paper on what all of this data is and inventories of this usage. It doesn't mean that anyone in Virginia will ever actually do anything with that white paper, and it'll waste my time and yours.
And so there's two parts to wordsmith from what you had just mentioned there. So one is about the status of and information on, and the other is about the word request. From what Troy had suggested, there was support coordination, because universities can't be coordinated. So that's possible too. So think about what you can use for that.
I don't know that I would necessarily agree with Troy that universities cannot be coordinated. You cannot direct individual faculty to do things or not do things. You can work with their administrations and say, this is something that is a need of the state, and how will you or won't you serve that? I think, among us who are at the table or online, Karen is probably the most highly ranked within her university to comment on, if the state chief resilience officer came to VCU's vice president for research, how would that be received? I think that there are also other universities that would be receptive to this. So I don't know that we can say that coordination is never possible. It's just, we haven't really made an effort to do it the right way.
Okay. So how would you, if we just take the first part of the sentence, and we're not going to talk about the collection and sharing of quantitative and further from this first part, how would you best phrase that first half? So the,
How about the CRO should coordinate with the universities and the interagency?
I'm more comfortable with that than the, first approach.
it should coordinate with versus coordinate. One meaning, okay,
Yeah,
Coordinate
it's
with.
the CRO that's doing it with the other.
okay,
It just made a really good point, like, I believe the coordination is possible, but I think that, the CRO is the one who should instigate and handle the coordination through those entities.
great. So does that part sound good to everyone? Should coordinate with? The Chief Resilience Officer should coordinate with the Commonwealth Research Universities and the Interagency Resilience Management Team. For that first, sounds all right?
Say to collect and share.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that, well, I think including the status of information is valuable, right? Because you need to know the starting point before you figure, the one is about collecting and sharing data, and the other is like, what is the status? So, I don't know, what do you think, Jessica? Do we need to keep like what the status is of information? Like, where are we?
Yeah,
What do we
agree.
need to collect next? That's kind of the way I'm
Yeah,
looking at it.
Status is really important. There's plenty of places that have done this well, and there's plenty of places that have done this poorly.
Yeah.
And it's important to not repeat
Mhm.
mistakes that other states or
Right.
have made. The biggest thing that I just don't want us to get away with from, especially since this is, a 5-year plan, is somebody needs to do this.
Yeah.
It needs to happen. And figuring out, if we don't have aspirational language, then there is never the ability to push and support from a policy and funding perspective to actually get it done. And that was something that we kind of struggled with in North Carolina was, if we don't write this up and assume that someone will have a tool in the next 5 years to be able to make it happen, we will never get higher level support for staff time to do it. So getting that wording in there and making sure that it's going to be done, even if this isn't exactly a 20-page implementation plan with a budget, is really important.
So what if we have kind of a two-pronged thing here? One is to coordinate with the group to develop an inventory of existing data and to collect and share new quantitative and qualitative other stuff.
Great, I like that.
I like that too.
Looks good to me.
Okay.
And I think we could probably get rid of the, for everything after data usage. I'm not sure if that's really adding much. Or maybe after data usage and decision-making applications across the Commonwealth. Just put it that way.
What did we mean by inventories of data usage again?
I think we were talking about case studies of how people are actually using the data.
Or if they're not using it, why?
We got inventories in there. What?
What about assessments?
On the first or
The
second?
second.
Assessments of data usage.
Yeah.
I like that. Good recommendation. I guess just for me to like think about the product that is being created is some sort of data hub where these resources will be stored so that if a PDC or a research university is like thinking about another research product, they can go to this hub where this data will be stored and be like, okay, let's filter and sort. Is that what everyone else is imagining that what would come out of this recommendation as the product?
Yeah, and opportunities for collaboration, right? Opportunities to say, okay, these data exist in these different places. Here's a way to bring them together into something else, something more synthetic. But I think I agree, and hub is the right way to think about it.
You want to change any words to that effect?
I guess the only thing you could do is to develop a data hub that includes an inventory of X, Y, and Z, if you wanted to highlight the hub part. But I'm not sure it's necessary.
I kind of think just calling it an inventory leaves it pretty broad. I don't know if we have enough information at this point to really describe what the final product might look like. And I think, you know, getting back to, you know, one of Troy's points about, you know, funding, you know, I think a lot of what this actually could end up looking like a little bit or a lot of it about how much, what kind of resources we would devote to it.
I agree. There are definitely, you know, things that could be explored here. You know, VIM's Adapt VA portal, if more resources go into that, could be a starting point, but maybe we're talking about something that needs to be much bigger than that. I also don't, you know, I think that it's a bigger question than just this group, particularly once the CRO office gets started, has their feet on the ground, you know, figuring out where such a hub would live. Is that something that does need to be in a university, or is that something that needs to be inside an agency? And what does that start to look like? I don't think that we're ready to make those decisions, but leaving the language open gives us a pathway and a way to say, once we do know what the pathway is, here is something written down somewhere that we can hand to a funder and say, we are specifically responding to this request.
Could I ask a question? I'm sorry, I came in late. In the section on purpose, I think one of the values of this statement for me is that the data are kept up to date. Like data portals are often get obsolete pretty quickly if the data aren't up to date. I just wondered if in the purpose, we should say something like to support evidence-based flood resilience decision-making with up-to-date data or some language that refers to that, because to me that seems very important.
We use best available as
Best
one of
available.
our principles.
Good, that's fine, that would work too, but just with that point.
Would it be worth then for the recommendation to replace, you know, develop a data hub that includes to say something like to regularly inventory existing data?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well, that brings a question to me. I mean, I'm okay with the word here on both, but this gives me the impression, and we talked about this a little bit internally at VIMS, that this would tell somebody this is a dynamic moving engine that has monthly updates or something. When you look at how data that can be used are funded, collected, summarized, and reported, that's a long time. A year is a short time for something like that. And we're going to have updates to this plan, correct? Yeah. Every few years. I'm not sure how dynamic this is. I mean, it's worded fine. I'm not sure if that should be considered here, but we're going to have updates and things are going to develop organically anyway, no matter how it's worded. You know, here, the wordsmithing is important, but you know, the world is working as it is right now, and I don't see that changing much other than reporting through this structure. So just as long as everyone thinks that's really important in this process, that this is not going to be a monthly change, and we're not going to have new data monthly to throw into a new thing. It's going to be longer than that. That's just the real world of data collection, reporting, summarizing.
I mean, I would imagine that, after that part of the initial kind of buildup to this would be actually figuring out which products are more frequently updated.
Well, I think that was the data.
But that you
What
would
was
be
it,
able to
the,
take, so.
Inventories of data usage. What are people needing most, using most? How can we, weight that average to them?
Right, yeah, I mean, just in thinking about it through, the local government lens here. Property data, when a locality has an online GIS portal for people to access information, some of that data gets updated every day.
Yeah.
Some of that data gets updated maybe once a year, and I think depending on I think the inventory in some ways would be just figuring out kind of what's out there. We're not necessarily talking about doing all of that work to update everything all on the same schedule. So figuring all those details out would actually, I think, be part of this process.
So that's fine if there's an understanding. It's just, when we look at this, it's like, wow, people want to move real time in this, and real time is years, terms of years. So as long as that's understood.
Yeah, I don't necessarily look at this. To me, regularly inventory data means that you will be setting up a schedule and a regular communication where you have opportunities to update, not just the ecological or the climatological or, that kind of data, but also social and economic data and national updates that may occur when CMIP 7 happens, all of those things. The idea is to have some regular coordination as opposed to, maybe we'll get together once 2 years from now. To have this discussion is the most important thing.
I also agree. I think if you don't put that in, then it could easily be static, and that's not useful for anybody.
Yeah.
So irregularly is a pretty vague term. It could mean whatever it means for that data set or the needs. So I think that's fine the way it is. I just don't want it just to sound like it's going to be just a static thing that happens once.
Okay. Good discussion. So this sounds okay so far? All right. Are you ready to move on to the second one? Okay. Recommendation B. For this one, in terms of the TAC, there are 3 comments. One was to remove the parenthesis in the italics around the word temporal. Another is critical and temporal are not synonymous. And discuss the meaning behind this recommendation, make sure the wording captures that meaning. In other words, or for example, refine what temporal flood resilience data is. So a lot is focusing on that word temporal in the comments. Anything from Troy?
So Troy's comment is on the second half of the recommendation, starting with determine and adopt. Because this text is a bit confusing. I think there are 2 ideas in the text. One, to prioritize data needs, and a second, to identify a programmatic lead to fulfill those needs. The original recommendation called for an identification of critical data needs and fund the acquisition, processing, analysis to fulfill that need. If we use a long list of verbs, acquiring, developing, processing, then we risk inadvertently leaving a needed action off. And then we are less able to flag that as a need as a recommendation of the TAC. Is there a cleaner way to say this? For example, fulfilling the data need.
Okay, so Troy is suggesting
he did put in some suggested text. So Troy's recommendation is as follows. The DCR Office of Resilience Planning and other state agencies should identify priority data needs to support ongoing planning and decision-making and designate program leads for fulfilling those needs.
Right, so we'll go ahead and start wordsmithing. Do you want to read that one more time and see what this group thinks?
The DCR Office of Resilience and Planning and other state agencies should identify priority data needs to support ongoing planning and decision-making and designate program leads for fulfilling those needs.
How does that sound verbally? We're gonna try to type that in here so you can see it.
Thing to me, the research. Universities would also have an idea of what data needs for.
So maybe you want to,
You could pass that out.
hey, Matt, can you pass that down? We'll copy it. So what you're saying is it shouldn't just be the DCR Office of Resilience Planning and other state agencies,
But it should.
right? We should,
The research.
we should include the research university. Yeah. What do you all think there? Makes sense, there are nods.
Well, I mean, I think that, one question that brings to mind is to what extent are the research universities being treated as kind of contract support for state agencies or, our state, local, regional planning efforts? I think as Jess mentioned earlier, faculty, are their research faculty, they're there to do the reason their actual job. And in most cases, we don't have centers in Virginia that are set up to do this kind of work like you might have in other states. And so that might be part of the conversation, but I would be hesitant to put them in there and say, you're going to collect this data for us if we don't have a plan for that.
Okay. So,
I mean, I like the idea of having that kind of structure in Virginia. I don't think we're there yet, right? And so I think if
We're a little different animal than
Right.
others.
yes,
And we're kind of a hybrid between what you're saying.
right.
But I would offer that the way it's written now, that it makes sense to have research universities be part of the group that identifies priority data needs. I mean, the way it's written, it doesn't obligate us to collect those data, but it makes use of the expert experience you have within the different universities to help.
Yeah, I think with this new language here, I think it makes a lot more sense to add in the universities than with the original language.
do you want to say in collaboration with university or? So the DCR Office of Resilience Planning and other state agencies in collaboration with,
Well, if we're gonna go that route, I would add in local governments as well. But yeah, in collaboration with research universities and local governments.
You should
I like
be
that.
studying everything that's affected by resilience if we do that, so.
No, I agree with that point. I think that makes sense. I mean, those are the two groups that would have expertise.
Just in terms of what would be needed,
Yeah,
right? Not so much even as in terms of like how to get it,
right.
but the questions that we have. And
Yeah, I mean, the debate program was born and matured on, university research.
Right.
From there, and then it went and matured into, everyone else saying, here's what we need, here's how
the philosophy that it is today.
philosophy it is today, yes. I agree that somewhere research institutes or research entities should be included in that in some way, because it'd be hard to get on many things without that cooperation.
and you can say if you were concerned about, the long list of who to collaborate with, you could say in collaboration with research universities and others. If you want a more general term, instead of putting local governments in there.
Well, how top-down controlling do you want, I guess is the question. And something that's who really says, we need this and let's get it? I mean, it's supposed to be a community conversation, correct?
Yeah. Maybe there's a way to facilitate connecting like what needs are from local governments to the providers or the subject matter experts to help them identify the solutions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
How we do that. But if there's some way to bring that together, like a dating app or something. What are you looking for? What are you offering? Some way to
Swipe right on the data.
That's right, what data, what
Yeah.
something to, I know not necessarily the tool, but some way to bring the knowledge together.
Yeah, just don't make it sound like it's going to be self-controlling, like you just said.
Right.
A
Well,
lot of
and
words.
it's gonna have to be flexible, and that's one thing that I like about the way the wording is now, is that it creates that flexibility. Let's say their need comes up, and in collaboration with this group, we realize that there is a new program from Federal Highways that would help VDOT solve this issue. And it needs to be in collaboration with a university or a local government or something like that. It gives that flexibility to say, yes, we've created this group. We have the right people at the table to be able to coordinate and help whoever needs to be the lead, because that federal program designates who they want to fund, can do that. It doesn't hold us to a prescriptive thing where it has to always fall on DCR or the universities or whoever.
So in looking at this, Matt, should we also probably explain a moment about what is the Chief Resilience Officer and what is the Resilience Management Team?
Sure, so the Chief Resilience Officer position exists in code as an appointed position that is essentially set up as a hub and spoke model where they are connective tissue across multiple state agencies. And that happens in the interagency resilience management team, or each state agency or designated other entities, there's a couple of parties in there, provide a resilience coordinator to help share information with the Chief Resilience Officer so that they can better coordinate intergovernmental and interagency efforts on what we're doing to address resilience and how we're trying to be more successful in obtaining funding to support it. And so the advisory or the interagency management team advises as an advisory body to the Chief Resilience Officer. The Chief Resilience Officer can request things that all agencies shall assist the CRO in the discharge of his duties on request. So I don't know if that, there is structure that exists. We just still haven't implemented it in Virginia.
Well, I don't want to prolong this to be obstinate, but what we changed in recommendation A was, to me, to us, was what data are needed. Recommendation B was, how was that going to be managed? And I think we've started some overlap here between the two. I'm not saying that's good, bad, or ugly, but we're both getting to who says what data is needed in both. In a way. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to admit it.
Good discussion.
It was my understanding that recommendation B was about the timeliness of data. If we look at the purpose, it was best available data to inform decisions in a changing environment. And so I'm just curious, like the movement away from the temporal part. When I initially read that recommendation, I was thinking something like the Mesonet, where I could go on and see live statuses of all the river gauges, stream gauges, lake levels, and it would tell me river stage, are we in flood alert, are we not? When I was imagining something like that, that sort of changed now.
Yeah, I think a lot of this recommendation, to your point, Ian, one of the items that no agency owns is the expansion of the land cover land use data beyond the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So within Chesapeake Bay watershed, I forget the entity that's doing it, we're updating our land use land cover. And DCR with DEQ, I think even with HRPDC to get the money back to EPA to expand that effort statewide. So we have a consistent data set, but nobody really owns that process. So it's very ad hoc. And so does somebody then take responsibility? Who owns that moving forward so that every time they're updating the Bay watershed data, we're also getting statewide updates. So we have these consistent data. And then there might be other opportunities, whether it's LiDAR data or other data sets that if you identify the need, somebody has to take responsibility, would need funding too, and then could try to own that and be responsible for it.
That's what I thought the core recommendation be was, you know, you got that. So I'm not sure if we might. Closer. Don't know.
Gotcha. Thank you for the context.
I think A is more the inventory.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think needs will come out of A. But I don't know, we're stating in A that we're developing a needs.
Everybody's hearing that.
Yeah, A is almost the what's available. B is the what are we gonna target and who's gonna have that job? Whose responsibility is it to follow through?
I don't see that last part, Jessica.
I'll designate program leads for fulfilling those needs.
And program leads, what do we mean by that? Anybody?
Great question.
So at some point, I think that they talked about having, regional coordinators, under the Office of Resilient Planning, and in my mind, that's where that designates. But if that's not funded to hire regional coordinators, then that causes the confusion.
Yeah, that's probably a long term, that they're gonna be a hot minute before they get those FTEs. And Amanda Martin still doesn't have the FTEs that I asked for 5 years ago there. But, so I don't know that we wanna necessarily create something that is so specific that it can only be accomplished by people who don't exist yet. But to me, program leads, and maybe program leads implies too much of a program management structure. Maybe it's more responsible parties for fulfilling that need, and it can be agile. I mean, I think of, you know, if I think, you know, Ian's dropping examples from Texas in there. But if I think of, you know, the coordination that I've seen happen in North Carolina or South Carolina, you know, your state EcoNet for weather observing may be operated by NC State University and the State Climate Office in North Carolina, or South Carolina DNR in South Carolina. And your emergency management may have responsibility for the stream gauges in one place. It's just going to depend who has the funding and the capacity available. So it's that way, as long as it is flexible enough to say that the person who could be responsible can be flexed to whatever the need, depending on what the need is, I think we're better off.
Definitely, thank you.
Who has the authority to designate responsible parties? And do we need to capture that, or because we're saying like DCR and other state agencies in collaboration should designate responsible?
Well, I think it would depend, right? I think it, you know, designation could be through the governor, right? Could tell the agencies what to do. There could be agreements that so you are self-assigning. If there's an agreement for the university to take on one of these things at the request of a funding entity, could think about the legislature stepping in and making that part of that day, and they haven't done it as specifically, but there are recent legislative mentions, right, where they say that, the Commonwealth Center for Recurrent Flooding Resiliency should do X, right, but X is pretty broad, and there's a lot of things, there's a lot of overlap already with that, so I think it would really depend on who we're thinking about.
Also depends on what the data is. The priority data could come from many different places. I mean, HRPDC could be the authoritative data on the traffic, flooding. And then, of course, there's also region that's authoritative that may be handling the LiDAR data. So, whatever the priority data is, depends on who the responsible party will be, and that's determined by many different, as been accurately stated.
So are you, in terms of how this is stated, are you thinking that this languaging is good? But it's a question of how does it come to life? How does it actually function?
I mean, if the hang up, and I kind of hung up a little bit on designating, right, that's a little strong.
Could you recommend?
I was gonna say, maybe, and recommend.
Or identify, yeah.
Oh, that's a good alternative.
And identify?
And then,
Recommend implementation strategies or acquisition strategies for fulfilling these needs. I think implementation is probably a better word, but and that way we get rid of designating responsible parties, we get away from that.
The strategy could include who the responsible party is.
Yeah.
I can tell you what to do, Matt, but not the other way.
Okay.
Recommend actions for you, Matt.
But you just didn't want to be the authoritative data,
I definitely do not want to be authoritative on anything.
Use that on my kids, recommend implementation strategy.
So the DCR, Office of Resilience Planning, and other state agencies, in collaboration with research universities and local government, should identify priority data needs to support ongoing planning and decision-making and recommend implementation strategies for fulfilling those needs. Sound pretty good? Okay. We're ready to move to the third one. Third one. Let's see, during the TAC, there was quite a bit of discussion. Almost a full page, so. There was a new suggested purpose. And then imposing assessment on public or private projects, the possibility of private projects voluntarily accepting assessment and monitoring. There's a need to provide both the public and private entities with resources and funding opportunities. This recommendation is also about giving those private individuals the proper information they need to make informed decisions. When considering wordsmithing this one, we want to discuss how identify and develop is doing important work in this recommendation. We're not implying the forceful monitoring of someone's property against their will. Need to discuss the intent of the recommendation. It's important to identify whether a project is working or not. It's also important to ensure the financial investments being made are effective. Once the project's implemented, how do we know that it's working? So criteria for success. The need to understand the types of projects is more important than the monitoring of every project related to the plan. So understand the types of projects. Find a connection or relationship between the funder and the researcher or monitor. And then someone asked if this overlapped with another recommendation. Which at this point is less likely that it is overlapping. But lots of things to consider there. Do you want to read Troy's comments?
Sure. So Troy had a comment on the term resilient success and recommends striking out success. He states, I would recommend that we avoid the term success since it is not necessary for the wording of the recommendation. It's subjective, and suggestions that anything less than meeting all the resilience dimensions is somehow a failure. It's not possible for any single project to achieve all dimensions of resilience. And then he also recommended in the second sentence at the end, adding and other emerging dimensions of resilience performance to better encapsulate future items that we may not know now.
And other emerging dimensions of
Resilience.
resilience performance. So a few different themes that you hear from different places, one about the emerging part, you know, what's, it's not just present day, but open to the future and being creative. And also the word success that came up in previous recommendations and other subcommittees, you know, possibly changing that word success in a different way. Where, how are you monitoring that came up here? So let's go back and look at this. And can someone summarize, maybe look at the purpose first. What is it you're wanting to do with this recommendation? Can anyone state that?
Well, first, what jumps out at me, just in the way this recommendation is structured, we're gonna identify or define what success is. And then we're gonna go out and monitor it. And that seems backwards. You should go out and monitor, collect data, analyze data, and then figure what is successful and what is not. Then define it, refine it, and then come back and monitor it again in the future.
So monitor and collect information, to see what you have to start,
Yeah.
then define what success means after that.
That's what I think.
Good as anything. I mean, we're in a very brief few sentences, we're discussing the history of natural resources. Continue to develop.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're gonna capture anything in my mind here, other than, you know, it's hard
The
enough
word.
to define just resilience.
Right.
And you can't define resilience, yes, I mean, if you put up a erosion control structure, if you don't get a nor'easter or, you know, a category storm in 15 years, how are you gonna monitor that? So I'm not, you know, there's a lot of layers of difficulty in whatever we're saying here. So I think we should try to be as short and broad as we can. I get the core request.
Can we say resilience metrics instead of success, maybe?
To define, is that the main purpose here? Define resilient metrics.
I think the second worst.
I was about to say, it's really similar to indicators there.
If we talk about performance later, are we talking about resilient performance and success?
Well,
We say in the, I'm sorry, I was gonna say, we say in the purpose what the goal of this is, which is to define, to see whether projects are working, the efficacy of resilience projects. So I think success, I would agree, is a dangerous word. Efficacy is a more, you know, is it producing the results that were intended to be produced when a project was established? And that doesn't require, I mean, that doesn't actually require specific indicators and thresholds. It's really going to be relevant to what the project is proposing.
Well, as we advise, which is what our program specific NIMS does, is there are metrics for success built in before you even construct a project.
That's what I'm thinking of.
And there's been over a century of engineering in this through Corps of Engineers and overseas, their overseas equivalents, research, universities, engineering consulting companies. And the way we look at it is let's just take a breakwater. What's the tide range? What is FEMA's 10-year, 50-year, 100-year storm level say? Is the breakwater designed to meet those those metrics. And that goes back to, what does the property owner want? Do they want to just pay for a 50-year storm or invest for a 50-year storm? Or do they want to invest for a 10-year storm or more? I don't want to add complexity here, but what I'm saying is, you don't have to just use after the fact for success. Because you're never going to reach it. You're always going to be grabbing for it. So, yeah, and you can design for success, and that's really where the state has been in the last 20 years or something like this. So
what would you say, how would you define success in that context? And what would you say the specific metrics are?
that's a really good question. It depends, again, what are you designing? What are you trying to address? You have a shoreline. It's hard to address flooding without building pop-up flood walls, but is it a storm surge? Is it erosive wave action? There are ways to address those engineeringly, and there have been for decades. So that's the best you can do, and hope that that works as you design it and construct it. So it's really difficult to grab this. There's always other ways you can look at it. So I'm not sure that I can really, on a bumper sticker, answer that question.
But that's why I
That would
think efficacy is a better word, because it's specific to the project and the goals of the project, the desired or intended result of that project. And so the indicators that you would use might be different for different projects, and it would fall under the categories that are listed in the last sentence of this. So that's why I think there's not, like you were saying, there's not like one way of defining it that would apply to every single project. And so efficacy sort of captures that. And if we identify what the categories of the indicators are that these projects will be looking for, that I think that addresses this, what you're uncomfortable with.
I like that. And if you're keeping the word define in there, I was, I guess, subtly or softly saying, is there another word for define? But I see the need for that.
And everyone likes the word efficacy?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can be interested with that. I continue to worry, especially having dealt with this kind of on the other side of literally having every politician and senator stare you in the face and say, this homeowner's upset because this person flooded, therefore you failed and you fix it. And that happens to our state agency colleagues. I can guarantee you anybody in the VDEM hazard mitigation program is going to have to deal with those kinds of questions in Southwest Virginia in the next year or two, as they're talking about how to rebuild. Getting to a point where we can critically think about success, acknowledging that we have to get away from single hazard bias and that it's a multi-criteria decision, is really important. I'm okay with the word efficacy. I feel like it's a little bit nerdier than a lot of who the audience needs to be for this report. But define is absolutely in there, because you're right, it's not going to be the same for each resilience case. And really it shouldn't. I mean, we should be talking about suites of solutions where we have some things that we know are going to protect against this amount of coastal erosion, but then in other things we have contingencies in case those fail, and then we have emergency protections, like nothing's going to stop a 15-foot storm surge but a big wall. I mean, those kind of suites of solutions we've got to get toward defining. And I think efficacy is okay. I just want to push back a little bit on that one. If I am a rural local government, efficacy is not going to speak to me so much as what does success look like, and what are the limits of what is successful.
How about performance standards? Are you defining resilience performance standards?
That,
That's what the,
no,
no,
performance is good, standard. I worry because what is a standard in Norfolk may not be a standard in Matthews County. But
okay.
performance,
I like what you said about suites. What about suites of resilience performance standards? Creating that tier system. Because that's what you're talking about, is like things change. I think that could be included in this recommendation, particularly I think in the Q3 full meeting, there was a desire to have both nature-based and gray infrastructure, that whole suite spectrum of projects. And I saw a lot of synchronicity with the recommendation C. I was thinking about what resilient success would look like. That seems like would fit in here.
yeah. I worry about suites being too wordy, a nerdy a word, but
Yeah.
I'm also not
Tiers.
good enough today to be able to.
Levels. Ben, help us out.
Sorry, I'm distracted by something.
So should define resilience,
Performance.
performance levels, resilience, success levels, it, years. Define resilience too, so.
I think standards, levels, tiers, all imply that there's a one end goal for each of these things, right? And I'm not sure, we're not identifying thresholds or categories. We're looking at performance relative to some intended outcome.
Yeah, outcome. Performance outcomes.
Good.
That's exactly it. Sorry, I was struggling.
So there's a few things I'm coming across from this one. One is that you're asking, right now, it's the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee to define resilience performance outcomes. At the same time, you're saying the research universities should be doing, should be identifying the indicators and some of the details, the metrics for those performance outcomes. Is that correct?
No, I actually like it, the wording similar to what we did in the previous one, which is like, in the previous one, we were identifying priorities. The state was doing it in coordination with universities and local governments. In this case, we're also doing the same thing now, but now instead of identifying priorities, we're identifying resilience outcomes. I guess I would like to move away from developing specific indicators. But we can, I mean, I like the categories in the last sentence. I just don't think you want to say to the universities, define exactly what the metric is for this one thing across the state.
So in one of the previous recommendations, we moved something like that in another committee. We moved those details of that last sentence into the second sentence of the purpose to give whomever you're tasking to figure out those indicators just some idea of what you're thinking, but you're not prescribing to them, this is what you should be thinking. Is that something you would want to do here? And that, again, going back to your, you can consider that, but going back to your main purpose of this recommendation, or what is your intention behind the wording of the recommendation? You have the purpose there. Is it about saying the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee should define resilience performance outcomes? And then separately, you're saying as research universities, we should be looking at indicators.
Well, yeah, I think in my mind that the definition of success of what we're trying to do, that's in the realm of the policymakers, right? That's the realm of the folks that are assigned to work with the CRO to determine, what do we mean when we say we want to be more resilient. And then where the research folks come into play is, but it'd be nice to be able to measure that, you know, quantitatively if possible. Because I think, you know, in my mind that they are more of the experts on kind of how to go about doing that and on what the current state of the research is to inform those discussions. And then that information is provided back to the agencies, to the committee, to the CRO, whoever, to help them actually determine, you know, are we making progress on these larger goals?
So you're asking, go ahead.
What's in code for the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee? So it's the committee shall advise the department DCR on 7 items. One of those items being, so the committee shall advise the department on establishing and measuring flood resilience goals and metrics for the Commonwealth.
And that's in code.
That is, so the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee is advising DC on what those goals and metrics should be. So I don't know, that kind of contradicts them defining. So I don't know if they are the right, or, I mean, if you change, I know we want to define these outcomes, but maybe they're not the right responsible party. Are we defining outcomes for individual projects or broad flood resilience?
That's a great question.
I would think that the latter would come potentially before the former. And to be honest, I think, and I've made this point in the TAC meetings as well, I don't think we've actually figured that big question out yet. And until we do, it makes it harder to figure out the other questions, and this ties into some of the other subcommittees as well. Prioritization for one, we're trying to compare apples to apples, but really we don't, you know, so. And maybe it's not the advisory committee, maybe this is one of those things where like the CRO in consultation, you know, I don't know who's responsible for defining. And who gets the last say, the governor, the legislature. Matt down.
Didn't you say that it's already kind of in code for the?
Well, it's in code that the committee, the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee, should advise the department on flood resilience goals and metrics. And for the statewide plan we've just started, we are trying to define a vision of flood resilience and what some of the goals would be to achieving flood resilience as a Commonwealth. We are trying to get there through the statewide planning process.
You know, in some ways, this is us kicking the can, right? Because, you know, we did not as a TAC answer this question. But we have a new committee that's starting up in January.
Right, we have not addressed the first part.
We can do it. Let's make it their problem.
But like having somebody to help with the indicators and the monitoring methods, that's where this, like the original recommendation, this was a combined recommendation of 3. Defining what resilient success looks like, developing the measures, the methods to monitor performance, and then supporting research on next generation kind of metrics. So it has kind of evolved.
Who would you put in if you didn't have the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee? I and a few others have always had a questionable view of just the term flood, which is now applied to, you know, other related damages, not just flood.
Yeah.
So, I know that's a semantics type of thing, but this is, you know, if you take it as it's, you know, so let it be written, so let it be done. This is just flood. And that's completely different from storm or anything else. It's not, everything is not encompassed under that word, but that's fine. If everybody is in the same agreement, I'm not trying to say that, but you were saying, is this the right group because they've already got codified requirements.
Yeah, and so if we wanted to mirror, it could be the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee should advise DCR on defining resilience performance outcomes. That aligns with what's in code right
If you keep that committee, that one committee.
now. If you have a
This much-
committee advising DCR
Yeah.
to define resilience performance outcomes.
Well, I think it's a square way to code is usually is better. Very good.
And it sounds like we have two concepts together, which we merged, before. So is it okay? The Flood Resilience Advisory Committee should advise DCR to define resilience performance outcomes. And then maybe you say these outcomes can be supported by the Commonwealth research universities identifying and developing indicators. Like, you want to connect the outcomes to those indicators?
Well, personally, I think this is fine for what we're trying to do. It's the best we want to do because when everybody gets together to do this later, they're gonna have the same conversation we've had right now. Then they're gonna break into subcommittees and those are gonna have the same conversation that they're having right now. So, we'll just pass the buck on down the line. I guess. What do you think?
So, and then we can take a break if you want to. Take a few minutes out.
Before we take a break or whatever, I do like your idea of taking that sentence and making it under appropriate.
Oh, so take
I don't know
that,
if anyone else does, but
is that okay? You take that and move on to the purpose, it helps the recommendation be a little similar, but keep that, okay? Everyone okay with that?
Right word, is it while the universities or and the universities? Why is it while the universities?
Well, tends to show the difference between those two. Is that what is the point that you were making as a subcommittee? To say, Flood Resilience Advisory Committee does this, universities should be doing that.
Seems weird.
Does it should advise DCR on how to? Or is it just to define? I'm not an English major, so I'm not much describing, it just keeps advise DCR to define.
They go in parallel, can they be?
check out while and put a semicolon in there.
It's a
We're having a little trouble with the font size on the right, but
yeah.
in the meantime, right, let me read what that recommendation says. So it says the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee should advise DCR to define resilience performance outcomes while the Commonwealth's research universities should identify and develop indicators and monitoring methods to assess the performance of resilience projects with key and relevant stakeholders, entities, NGOs, etc.
And respond, and they're both doing it at the same time, and they both required it. Wow, this creates a little separation. You're over here while we're over here,
Right?
but. I don't know.
I have a question, because the term advise DCR to define. So that committee is saying DCR, you need to define, it's like that.
I
Can
think
we
it's-
say advise DCR on resilience performance outcomes? Or if you wanted to, I still have a problem with define, but other people are fine with it, it's okay. We're a democracy. At
I
least
think
for now.
if you add in the how to define, that kind of streamlines it on what they
On
want
how
that
to,
definition to
mhm.
be.
Yeah. So
we're still telling DCR to define it, but how to define it.
And that's already in code too, the need to define.
okay, points to that.
Here go the defined word.
Yeah. We don't have the code says establishing and measuring flood resilience goals. It was established, the same as defined them.
Well, how to establish the outcomes of the universities identify and develop metrics or methods.
So do you want to use the word establish instead of define based on what the code is saying?
Either.
Sounds like GCR is in the it's part of what you're doing anyway, so this is saying, in order to help you do it, the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee. can help.
It's a recommendation to reinforce what we're already required to do in the first place. And then saying, and then once you've done that, you're gonna need help on how to actually measure. What, how do you measure it and what are the needs?
The intent was for the committee to define here, correct? As we had it, as we went into this discussion. That's how
it started, yes.
Okay.
Fine.
But if you say the committee should advise DCR on resilience performance outcomes, that just inherently means that they've defined them in some way if they're advising. I'm just still trying to get rid of that word defined, but that's just me.
So you could take away how to define and just say on.
That's one option.
Or on
Again,
establishing or something.
Yeah.
On establishing resilience performance outcome. Okay. The Flood Resilience Advisory Committee.
So, I'm sorry, I'm like, I've got the list of who's on the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee in front of me. And a lot of these names I do know, as you know, they've been part of the TAC process, they've been really engaged. We know they know their stuff on this, but there are a lot of very high, everybody on this pretty much is a very high level executive. And some of these are agencies that really have not been as involved in the TAC process as one might have hoped. What do we do when the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee may or may not have the subject matter expertise personally to say, oh, this is an emerging area of research and this is how a performance outcome should be defined? Are we putting something on them where we're setting them up for not being able to follow through on providing the advice to DCR?
Well, but DCR should solicit input from subject matter experts, including the state's university research.
Well, what was the intent for the exercising of the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee's mission? Was it because high level, like as in other in the history of Virginia, these high level committees that are formed either through the General Assembly or somewhere else, they don't just operate in a vacuum. They delegate. Tell me what I should say. What do we need to do to determine this? So that's my question: is how was that committee structured to operate? That's a good question. That's right.
Yeah.
No kidding, but depends on why that level of member was put there.
So the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee is that an advisory committee? They're advising DCR. So
no, but how did they develop their advisory advice? Is it in a vacuum or is it with other committees made up of high level people that they delegate to those below them? Give me something to say and make it sound good.
It hasn't, so the committee doesn't officially start till February 1. The primary membership is state agencies. But there are some others on there. If you want, I can read through the list. VDEM, DHCD, VRA, DEQ, VDOT. Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, BMRC, DGS, Chesapeake Bay Commission, and Diversity, Opportunity, and Inclusion. And then we also have membership from Virginia Association of the PDCs, VML, and VACA, and others as the.
So the committee is essentially all of those entities
That's correct.
combined
Yes.
from top to bottom. So there may be the knowledge and expertise to develop for whoever is representing that particular agency.
Yeah, and the director of DCR is the chair of the committee. And may establish subcommittees or other bodies to advise the development and implementation of the coastal plan or other. So it has the flexibility to get additional subject matter expertise into that planning body. That planning body meets at least twice a calendar year.
Well, back to the good point that was made, is there faith in that? Keep that where we've got. I guess that was the question.
I mean, it's only advice to DCR. DCR still has the responsibility, right?
And I think, Matt, you were saying, you could flip that around, so you could say DCR should establish resilience performance outcomes in consultation with the flood or whatever verb you want, with the flood resilience, coordinating with the flood resilience advisory committee.
Yeah, I mean, so I popped the list in the chat, although I know those of you who are in the room are not gonna be able to. I'm gonna say this is not anything about anybody on that list, because I don't know a lot of them. I don't know these people. I don't want to say what they know. I don't want to say what they don't know. But I can say, when I look at North Carolina's interagency, at least their climate strategy report. So it's a little bit different, that climate risk as opposed to flood risk. I can go back and I can look, that's another one where they've got a structure where the top level is all, secretaries or deputy secretaries. But then there's also staff level coordination, and that staff level coordination is really important, because there are some agencies like North Carolina DEQ, North Carolina Emergency Management, ironically, Department of Adult Corrections, who you can go through and have really done a lot of their own learning at a high level about this, and would be able to respond in a meeting when this comes up and needs to be decided in a meeting that only happens twice a year, where they'd be able to say something about that. North Carolina Department of Commerce still does not understand what they're doing in this space. And that's, 4 years after we finished the plan. So it is very, very dependent upon how much those individuals are going to coordinate with their staff, who may be more of a subject matter expert, because if you're running VMRC, coastal resilience is nowhere near the only thing you're doing. So it's going to be all in the structure about how to support those folks who may not have been as immersed in resilience as those of us on the TAC have been.
So, Jess, is there a change in the language that you would be suggesting?
I wordsmithed something in the
Yeah,
chat.
could you read that, Ian? I think it's really good.
Sure. The Flood Resilience Advisory Committee should actively support the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, in establishing clear and measurable resilience goals aimed at enhancing the Commonwealth's capacity to withstand and recover from flood events. This collaborative effort will involve the Commonwealth's research universities and other key stakeholders, entities, NGOs, etc., which will contribute their expertise in developing relevant indicators and metrics to assess progress towards these resilience goals.
What do you think?
I really like that for a couple of reasons. One, we get away from success and performance and we talk about clear and measurable resilience goals, which is really understandable by people. And then you talk about the collaboration to develop relevant indicators and metrics to assess the progress, which is performance towards those goals. I really like those elements. I don't know, Sydney, if you can grab that from the chat.
Yeah, I like that a lot too, Ian. That's great.
Oh, the black box is the chat. Okay.
So in order to kind of make it a little bit more active, I would suggest that maybe that second sentence start with either DCR maybe, or the CRO, but DCR for now. DCR should solicit the involvement of the Commonwealth's research universities and other stakeholders in this effort. And then we kind of keep going with the last part of that. So that they can maybe.
Do we need to have in this effort after the, in parenthesis?
I don't
These
think we
are
need this effort.
Okay.
Not necessary,
Right?
but instead of which will say like so that they can.
Or just to contribute.
Or who contribute, yeah. And no comma.
Get rid of the comma.
Yeah.
Do you, okay, great. Do you need to list entities, NGOs, et cetera?
I don't think, what did we decide in other subcommittees on the definition of key stakeholders? Do you remember?
I think we just had key stakeholders. I don't know if there was a definition of them.
They're not the.
Yeah, that's a really good idea that once all of these come together, we should probably have a key, definitions of terms like key stakeholders so that they are consistent among all 20 of the recommendations.
Okay, so you're accepting removing the parenthesis in there and it's saying other key stakeholders, everyone's saying yes, so, okay.
Remove the
That.
whole statement.
Yeah. Okay, so let's read this. The Flood Resilience Advisory Committee should actively support the Department of Conservation and Recreation in establishing clear and measurable resilience goals aimed at enhancing the Commonwealth's capacity to withstand and recover from flood events. DCR should solicit the involvement of the Commonwealth's research universities and other key stakeholders to contribute their expertise in developing relevant indicators and metrics to assess progress toward these resilience goals.
Wonderful.
It's good.
You can shorten, you can just say DCR from the start, I believe,
It will be defined also.
yeah, we define up there. Okay,
Okay.
Thank you, Ian. That was brilliant.
We're still just.
Do we wanna
flood,
say-
is that correct? Because a lot of the money that's going into resilience is flood.
Instead of aimed at them.
Should it be climate?
We are just flood.
We're just,
coastal resilience, master plan piece, yeah.
we can't say anything other than flood.
For, I mean, these are recommendations for the coastal resilience master plan,
Right.
not broader recommendations for the.
Okay. We can move on.
So,
I just want to sleep tonight.
so do you want, Dave, you want to take a break until, let's say, 2:55? Let's set out 7 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then come back, and you'll be able to move faster actually after taking the 7-minute break, so don't worry that there's not enough time.
We're 60% done already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting close.
Yeah, there's looking pretty.
Ready, move on to D.
Hey, moving on to D, recommendation D. So looking at this one, there were 3 comments from TAC. We want to clarify local government stakeholders. Are we referring to the government themselves or the broader constituents? And then considering obstacles and gaps, when identified, the state could potentially bring the resources in to fill the gaps. And then ask me how this relates to the other, ONC recommendation. Which has probably changed a little bit since the way this was defined. Okay. So, let me go ahead and read it to you. Oh, we should have Troy's comments on it.
Yeah, do you want me to read? I'll read Troy's comments, which gets to the local government stakeholders part. So Troy notes that I'd encourage us not to limit the local stakeholders to government, since co-production can occur with NGOs, community groups, leaders, citizens, etc. Alternatively, we could delete the word government so that it reads local stakeholders and could imply all. I prefer the additional text, but would be okay with the deletion. And Troy's additional text would be engage with local government, NGO, and other community stakeholders. This is proposed language.
Can you reread that proposed language?
Yes. DCR's Office of Resilience Planning should engage with local government, NGO, and other community stakeholders to understand local obstacles and gaps. Interesting.
State level programs. Mhm.
I think that addition makes sense.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Should we also add tribal representatives?
After NGO, local government, NGO, tribal representatives. Or tribal and other community stakeholders, does that work?
Yeah.
NGO, not everyone understands non-government organization. Do you want to write that out? Should we?
We can.
Mhm. I'm not sure if it's non-government or non-government. We'll look it up.
That's all. He's fine.
How do you feel about this one? Does it work for you?
Non-governmental, good. That's okay.
I will just say, I think adding in tribal does open up a bit of a can of worms. It gets complicated, but that's for the Office of Resilience Planning to deal with and not me.
At the same time, I think it's going to get really, really awkward for the Office of Resilience if there is not a inclusion of tribal interests in this.
I know in the outreach and coordination subcommittee, key stakeholders, I think one of the earlier definitions was minority communities, tribal nations, Department of Defense, critical infrastructure owners, and other federal facility owners as like includes but not limited to. Is this just a time when we would just want to like keep it at key stakeholders again and keep that consistent language? Or do we want to spell out everyone?
I think
So
if
if you
there's an
have-
overall effort to define key stakeholders somewhere and then continue to use it consistently across all of the subcommittee's recommendations, we're better off. But I do think that this needs to also include tribes because we will make DCR's life very difficult if the tribes are left out. It's you know, recognizing that, yes, it's absolutely challenging. You are negotiating with sovereign governments. That is hard and it is difficult work that is, you know, full of lots of challenges, but it's important to include.
So is there, if we say key stakeholders, is there any difference, if we look across all recommendations, do the key stakeholders need to be different ever? Is it always the same? Or can you allow the lead for that recommendation to figure out who the key stakeholders are? And maybe that's a larger TAC question we can save.
I think each recommendation is potentially gonna have its own suite of key stakeholders. So I think if you identify it at a much higher level, and identify it broadly, then each one of these recommendations, or at least from a subcommittee. They will identify who the key stakeholders are for that topic.
So does that mean you would want them listed here? If
I
that's,
think I don't want to list it.
okay,
Yeah, I think there are advantages to saying these stakeholders, because that, and I think that'll vary, depending, like you said, on the program, right? Every program's gonna have different people, different groups that are involved at different levels, and that's gonna be up to the discretion and the wisdom of, you know, ORP or, you know, the other state agencies that might be involved in this process.
so it's really whoever is the active agency at the top or organization will figure out who those key stakeholders are, right? Okay, so let's turn that into key stakeholders.
So if we're taking out local in there, should we just say understand obstacles and gaps instead of local obstacles and gaps?
Well, I think looking at
Oh,
the
on
purpose, it
purpose,
is
yeah.
local resilience challenges.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any other changes to this one?
Super small thing, but you need state level should be hyphenated in the last.
Oh, yeah, there
Sure.
it is.
Nothing is small today, by the way. If you see any slight changes, we should
Thank you.
make them. Good. Okay, time to move on to number 5. So for E, this one had a fair amount of discussion, looks like it TAC. Because it's long, I'm gonna read the recommendation first, and then we'll go into what the TAC comments were. The Commonwealth's research universities should convene to evaluate the performance of existing and innovative nature-based solutions for water quantity and water quality protection through use-inspired collaborations with public, including other universities, and private partners, and establish working groups to track progress, adapt approaches, and identify funding sources for continued collaborative efforts. So here, the purpose was to recognize the importance of nature-based solutions and that there is more need for understanding those. And there's a comment that the third recommendation, C, covers all items, but this one's more for the nature-based solutions. Someone suggested dropping including other universities because we said research university collaborative. Not sure what's being described or should be the only university function. Not sure that what's being described can or should be the only university function. We lost some context of other parties while combining the recommendations, so it's not only university sources. What is meant by use-inspired collaborations? There's a need to tweak this current wording because the original wording was more expansive and it showed applied science rather than fundamental science. Then consider the usage of the word convene. That's our verb up front here. So that would imply the physical meeting. Maybe there's another word there. And then the importance of considering the whole catalog solution, such as the gray and hybrid approaches, as well as green and nature-based. Is this the correct place to identify the wholeness of that catalog and not just single out the nature-based solutions? And then we list some other things here, like we need to create hardened structures that adapt and move through time, not just nature-based solutions. Consider what works under what conditions. Need opportunity cost of choosing one solution versus another. And should there be a space in the recommendation that speaks to the managing of water? So we did talk a little bit in a previous recommendation in the earlier subcommittee today about managing of water and the tools and technologies that can be used for that. So lots of things there. Anything that Troy said?
Troy highlighted that and recommends removing convene to. Troy's statement is convene to evaluate does not make sense to me. Similar to recommendation A, there's an interest to see universities convene and have a dialogue that leads to greater collaboration, information sharing, and eventually coordination. But that is a different objective than evaluate performance of nature-based solutions. And Troy's second comment was on the phrase establish working groups to track progress and recommends deleting established working groups too. Troy's comment is, I don't think we need to prescribe the mechanism for tracking progress, how to adapt approaches, identify funding. Some of this already exists within government-funded water adaptation economy.org initiative. Those are two of Troy's comments, removing convene to, as well as removing established working groups.
Okay. So we can go ahead and put those in there, see what you think about that if you'd like. So just in track changes, go ahead and strike convene to.
I think you can also strike use inspired. I mean, I understand what that's saying, but it's a kind of loaded word without more context.
Yeah.
And it's implied with the collaborations with public and private partners.
Okay.
You can strike including other universities.
Yeah.
What is the role of agencies in this conversation? I feel like when we talk about like the BA program, looking at different management strategies, or we have, you know, DEQ and the role they have with the stormwater management practices that are out there, that there's a dialogue between agencies and researchers. And that it really is more of a hand-in-hand kind of effort, right? It's not just like a, hey, go and take a look at this. It's a back and forth conversation. Am I mistaken in that? So I guess I'm wondering, would it be worthwhile to say like the, you know, state agencies and the Commonwealth Collegiate Universities should evaluate the performance? Is there a role, like more of a direct role, or a reason to include the agencies that would be in charge of actually approving these practices or regulating the practices, to make sure that the research of answering the questions that they would need to have answered before they could sign off on them?
No, that's a good thought. I mean, like, again, we're a little special cases. We do evaluations on everyone, right, one of the things, but, so I think that's, you know, that could be included, I think, and you know, be more practical. Following that, you know, I guess I'm just too close to the situation, but, evaluation of performance of existing and innovative nature-based solutions been going on for decades. Because they've been done, they just not been under that marketing term. So I don't know if it's fine the way it is. I'm not arguing for wording changes, but it sounds like, hey, we've got to start doing our job with this because nothing's been done. So a lot of everything is just continuation of what it is and refining, you know, splitting hairs in cases. So I don't want to say to continue to evaluate or put anything, but just so I just had to get that out. This is not a new, it is not near a new concept from a scientific perspective or a natural resource management perspective.
So is it about collaborating to do that then? Like, so is your purpose isn't to say go and do that because it's already being done? Is your purpose more about?
Well, we could always continue to do that. When they say, I think somebody had new or something innovative, there's never not been innovative. I have dealt with old caskets put on the shoreline, septic tanks, people having any different lawn ornament they want to put out there that's just a hard structure between the wave and the shore. And they call them innovative. You know, this is groundbreaking. So, you know, there's nothing really new. You know, I mean, a rock is about 300 million years behind.
Do we want to say emerging instead? Would that be better?
I'm not trying to change the word because this is going to, again, you know, evolve as it will evolve, as it has evolved to this.
Yeah.
We used emerging in an earlier.
We did.
When I don't disagree with private partners because that's always good. But just, no, I just sat through an infomercial about one of these new lawn ornaments, that this is the greatest thing since granite. And that's what you're gonna get through a lot of this, is I have a product and I wanna sell it. So, anyway.
So,
I'm still stuck on the used.
Take care of that.
But-
Well,
Well, we think they proposed to do that. Well, my point is, it's been everything and anything to use, and it's been called, you know, this is a reuse, innovative reuse.
Let's say there is a possibility of new innovative. Like,
Oh, sure, I mean,
like merging might be the better word of.
human ingenuity is gonna, do stuff, but still, you're just stopping a wave or stopping water from going from here to here. And,
Emerging was used before, if that helps the consistent use of terms. Is emerging okay if we replace that? Okay.
Fine, I'm fine with that.
Do we want
Thank
to leave
you.
it at nature based? Remember several people talking
Comments
about nature
about-
and structural.
marshes do not stop flooding. Scientifically proven. So what stops flooding is non-nature based. So if you're just determining flooding,
I thought,
Nature.
going back to like the principles of the coastal resiliency master plan, there's that recognize the importance of protecting and enhancing green infrastructure like natural coastal barriers and fish and wildlife habitat by prioritizing nature-based solutions. I saw that kind of lock into this recommendation. Plus, we're kind of studying like, are these working? We know non-structure structural gray infrastructure will stop water. Are there ways of us studying and the research universities evaluating performance of these nature-based solutions? Seems like something worth pursuing.
Yeah, and I think, an important context, maybe a little bit there, Ian, is that it's not necessarily a, does this work or does it not? Because if your only metric is stopping flooding, then no. If your metric is to provide an additional line of defense that also provides you some ancillary benefit, then yes, there are these different things. But I do think that we need to do a lot more to specifically articulate and quantify a lot of these, not only in terms of flood reduction benefits and water quality benefits, but things like the economics of these things. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have arguments like we're in the middle of in, blowing up in Norfolk right now, where we've got folks in Freemason who are convinced we don't really need a seawall because magical nature-based solutions can solve all of their needs if we put them all inland. And it's, y'all know I love nature-based features. It's a whole lot of what we do, but it's all about expectations management, right? And so whether or not they have been studied in the past, I think we need to continue doing so, particularly as the baselines of flooding are changing over time, so that we can continue to articulate where there are benefits across multiple categories of benefits, and then the limitations of these things. But I think the nature-based solutions focus here was originally, you're exactly right, because of this specific prioritization in the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. We know that they're great. We know that they have benefits, but we also know that they are not silver bullets. And we have to put some parameters on that, I think, to get toward real roadmaps to solutions, as opposed to this false choice of it has to be one or the other.
Well, I think, to build on that, what we did have, there's another recommendation that looked at performance of resilience projects generally. And then this one was focused, the purpose here is focused on nature-based, and I think there is a need for the quantification of some of these benefits or lack thereof. We do have these conversations where people do think that, you know, a living shoreline will stop flooding. And it'd be really nice to be able to point to some papers that say, you know, no, but it will help with your erosion, right? Which is what it's designed to do. It's not meant to help with the flooding, but there
That's
are.
why we took it out of the wetlands guidelines. It was in there originally
Right, so,
wrongly.
but I wonder if we could add nature-based and hybrid solutions. I don't know, I mean, I don't have any in particular in mind right now, but I think that's something that is worth kind of calling out specifically. That hasn't really gotten in my mind, a ton of attention, at the level of detail where it would be helpful, like to have folks like them and others take a look at it and really show off that research.
Does hybrid, is the definition of a hybrid solution including nature-based within it?
No, I would say nature-based and hybrid. So hybrid is really trying to blend the two, where nature-based is almost entirely focused on the green stuff.
And hybrid would be green plus something.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
so it's still
Ben
related.
makes a
Yeah.
good point, I think, in the fact, finally, you made a good point. After all these years, but, no, nature-based takes on a definition, a life of its own. And everything that you're looking at on a shoreline situation, some places, all you need is to slope your bank, plant it, get rid of some of the trees and make it like that. And it's in a headland situation, that's going to take care of your erosion. But nature-based now is how we advise how in the VMRC and the localities are applying it is if you remember, we have living shoreline general permits, and they're group one and group twos. Those started out as, like Ben was saying, just the sand and the marsh plants and the upper marsh plants and the riparian situation. But it quickly went to, those don't work in flooding or erosion control from wave action in certain situations. So now, both of those general permits have some form of structure in front of the nature-based stuff. So the way I interpret this from a daily practice is, can you, with what is going to be required to stop mama's wrath when we really get down to it, can you incorporate nature-based things or can you not? A flood wall, you're not going to incorporate nature-based into a flood wall that pops up. But if you can have that added value from a nature-based element that provides habitat, not just water quality, or I don't know what water quantity means here. I wouldn't know even ask. But stormwater. Okay, well, that may be in the non-tidal areas or so, which is great if they're doing that too. But so, I don't think we can word anything to this, respect, but that's where things are managed now from the nature-based is, and we know that water quality functions and values of wetlands are size specific. A 3-foot wide marsh along a shoreline, it will fix nitrogen to a certain level and such, and it will provide, microbiome, but the signal a few feet away from that is not there. So it's all scale based for something. But if you can try to incorporate that and try to see how you can incorporate those into what's really needed for flood and storm resilience, that's the way we're looking at that. And I'm not trying to say wording is different, just an understanding. And I'll cap that, ice it with, as you well know, what we're talking about. No final decision is made in Virginia other than from an appointed citizen on these, whether it be locality-based, wetlands boards, or state agencies. Pretty much. Most of the decisions are made by citizens appointed, and those go all over the board. So
So I just would say that I think we should definitely include hybrid. There are also lots of hybrid solutions. If you create a berm and then you have it grown with salt marsh grass or, dune grass, that's a hybrid solution because there's something that's been created under it. So I think that's just like a really simple addition. So we should keep that. I do have one question, whether there is any relevance to including the idea of the co-benefits that we're all talking about. If we should call those out in some way in this, or if we should not. It's really just an open question. There are a lot of things that we benefit from in addition to flood protection.
The purpose we have other benefits, but.
Straight
Good
to me.
point.
So Karen, you say like we would evaluate the performance and co-benefits, like we add that of existing?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's what I would suggest, but I don't have strong feelings about it. So I wondered what other people thought, but I think it's something we should call out because we see it more and more.
Are you evaluating the co-benefit or identifying the co-benefit?
I think
Or
both,
just
but I
value.
think it's a lot.
I think we're probably evaluating them if we want to put, I think I would say evaluate.
We recommend incorporating, but. So.
Incorporating co-benefits. Is that what you're
Oh,
saying?
I think evaluate is fits with the theme of what this recommendation started out as, and I'm not against that, but when we advise, we try to incorporate, we recommend modification projects to incorporate nature-based features and such. Anyway,
If
I think about.
you go back to Jessica's point about the economic valuation, that the co-benefits really fit into that.
Knowing that the Community Flood Preparedness Fund gives matched bonuses for nature-based solutions and hybrid solutions, I also see how this research would be able to inform a funding mechanism later on.
Given the length of this thing, and it seems like we have a really, really long initial clause, and then that comma is technically not necessary after partners, I would recommend actually separating out that last bit and saying these efforts should track progress. Do the rest that way. It's just we have a lot in the middle there between the verb and the comma that we had before.
Just from a consistency standpoint, and other recommendations, we've used the term key stakeholders. Can we not use that here in place of public and private partners?
It is specific, or does key stakeholders work?
Do you consider a government agency a key stakeholder?
Absolutely.
That's what we have this recommendation, right?
Yeah.
Do they use the term partners in any other recommendations? Okay,
I don't think so.
yeah,
We use key stakeholders a lot.
yeah.
Good call.
I mean, I think that might get brought up at the full TAC meeting. I think in my mind, it includes, everybody that should be there. I think there was probably at some point during the discussion of this, some desire to have the private sector that's working on some of these solutions to be specifically called out.
Right.
I don't know if it's really super necessary to do so. In my mind, key stakeholders is fine. I'm just saying, I think somebody else.
We should make
can do that.
T-shirts and hand them out. I don't know who you are, right? That didn't go in the minutes.
I do want to say, Ben's got a. Yeah, I don't think we need to list God and everybody every time we say key stakeholders. We need to do that once. But Ben does have a good point about private sector. I mean, the amount of adaptation that is going to need to be done on private lands, and to get private entities on board, government cannot do all of this. So maybe not here and maybe not our subcommittee, but that overarching acknowledgement to bring the
There you
private sector in somewhere is important.
It seems like in this case, maybe it's important to have it out there. Is that what you'd like?
I'm fine with it either way. I'm just saying, I think other people might want to emphasize the private sector.
Or change partners with stakeholders, and then you're just
Okay.
emphasizing
Which-
public and private,
There you go.
but also keeping the stakeholders.
Okay. So, I'll read it once. The Commonwealth's research universities should evaluate the performance and co-benefits of existing and emerging nature-based and hybrid solutions for water quantity and water quality protections through collaborations with public and private stakeholders. These efforts should track progress, adapt approaches, and identify funding sources for continued collaborative efforts. You have, and this is probably just fine, I'll just point it out to you, in the purpose, it still says existing and innovative. And in the recommendation, we changed the word innovative to emerging. Is it okay that it's different?
I would update it for consistency.
Okay.
You should probably add the hybrid to that as well.
Uh-huh. Nature-based. So, sounds good. Here, what we're going to do is we're going back to the top. We're going to quickly review each of these. And what you want to do is make sure that you're comfortable voting on it with the language that's there. So if you're not comfortable voting on it, and you want to change something, just I'll read each one and just call out if you see a change. The Chief Resilience Officer should coordinate with the Commonwealth's research universities and the Interagency Resilience Management Team to regularly inventory existing data and to collect and share quantitative and qualitative flood resilience data, data production efforts, and assessments of data usage in decision-making applications across the Commonwealth. Okay. And the purpose. All right, because we minimize duplication of efforts and effectively mobilize our collective capacity to support evidence-based flood resilience decision-making with best available data. Good. All right, B. The DCR Office of Resilience Planning and other state agencies, in collaboration with research universities and local governments, should identify priority data needs to support ongoing planning and decision-making and recommend implementation strategies for fulfilling those needs. Good. And the purpose, maintain the best available data to inform decisions in a changing environment. Great. I need to have an opera singer's breath for this. The Flood Resilience Advisory Committee should actively support DCR in establishing clear and measurable resilience goals aimed at enhancing the Commonwealth's capacity to withstand and recover from flood events. DCR should solicit the involvement of the Commonwealth's research universities and other key stakeholders to contribute their expertise in developing relevant indicators and metrics to assess progress toward these resilience goals. And then the purpose. Define, measure, and monitor the efficacy of resilience projects to support adaptive management. The indicators should be based on Virginia-centric data and address ecological, infrastructure, social, economic, cultural, and environmental justice performance and other emerging dimensions of resilience performance. I think there's an extra space between emerging and dimension.
I'm not sure we need the indicators. We don't reference indicators anywhere else, I think. How can we just say this should be based? The define, measuring, and monitoring is what we're referred to when we say this should be based.
Indicators should be based. So change that to this should be based in the purpose there. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's my.
Okay. Everything good. We'll go on to D. DCR's Office of Resilience Planning should engage with key stakeholders to understand local obstacles and gaps in state-level programs and develop a statewide strategy that leverages co-production of innovative state level solutions to meet local needs. And the purpose? Identify appropriate state scale collective actions to support local resilience challenges for community engagement and innovation. That one, so Ben, that one relates to another recommendation from earlier today. And in this case, it's talking about state level programs. In the other case, we're talking about more funding there. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
More than just the money.
Great. So the Commonwealth research universities should evaluate the performance and co-benefits of existing and emerging nature-based and hybrid solutions for water quantity and water quality protections through collaborations with public and private stakeholders. These efforts should track progress, adapt approaches, and identify funding sources for continued collaborative efforts. Sounds good. And then the purpose, understand the flood risk reduction and other benefits of existing and emerging nature-based and hybrid solutions through collaborative research efforts. Fabulous. Okay. So turning it over to Wheeler for public comment.
Will
Eisenberg would like to speak.
Will, you're up.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me? Great. First off, just wanted to say thanks for the great discussion. I'm sure this is maybe not everybody's favorite task to go through these things one by one, but as a listener, it was really informative, and I feel like I learned a lot from what everybody was saying. But the thing that I really just wanted to share was an observation on recommendation C. The purpose is define, measure, and monitor the efficacy of resilience projects to support adaptive management. And there's a lot of defining and coming up with metrics, but nothing about measuring and monitoring. Perhaps that's implied. Maybe that's just the nature of the beast, but that'll be figured out later. But it was just an observation that I wanted to share. Thanks.
Should we change where it says to assess progress at the very end? Should you change that word to monitor? And that would get to Will's comment. To monitor progress towards these resilience goals.
Progress. Yeah.
What is that?
We'll monitor progress.
Also looking at the C, I see that we have performance twice, pretty close to each other in the purpose. After environmental justice and then resilience performance.
Take out the first one, right?
Yeah, the first one.
Do we need that hand?
If you take that one out, right?
Yeah.
Cultural, environmental justice, and other emerging dimensions of resilience performance. Very good. Okay. Any other public comment for it?
That was all.
Okay, we can move towards the voting process. And what you'll want to do is if you can pull out your phones, and this works for those who are members who are online or in person, and if there's more than one of you representing an organization, we just want one vote from the organization. Okay, so we're good.
We have 9 organizations and 9, would be 9 organizations.
So you can go ahead and you can use your camera with the QR code, or you can type in menti.com, and there's a special code there. And once you get there, what you'll do is go ahead and follow what it tells you to do for a moment, and you'll be able to basically log in with your organization name.
So mine says waiting for a presenter.
I've got 3, give it a second, because I've got 3 people that have
Got
got
it.
it.
So you can give it the thumbs up, right?
Oh.
You can give it the thumbs up.
We're up to 7. 2 more.
And you're going to have two practice questions in just a moment. One is about your favorite flavor of ice cream, and the other one is set up in a way that you're going to have the three choices to vote like you would with the recommendations. So go ahead and follow those prompts when Wheeler will be.
There's two people that have not joined.
Is there anyone who thinks they might not be in?
You push the thumbs up.
Yeah, okay, we got 8. There's 9. Okay, everybody's here.
Okay.
So this is your practice question. What's your favorite ice cream flavor? You do not have to hit thumbs up. You can just vote. Or you can hit thumbs up if you like. Two more people, all of you. It's fairly split between, it's vanilla and chocolate. Oh, other takes the lead. And see what happens.
Every committee, every subcommittee was different on the outcome of ice cream.
And those won't be in the minutes.
That should be a slot.
Yeah. So go ahead and go to the next question.
But we just need one more person to pick ice cream.
Sorry.
So make sure if you're having problems, please speak up.
Someone's facing an existential crisis.
They went to the freezer and got all.
This is the research,
Who's on?
right? They have to do a sample.
Ian, are you still online?
No, nobody's gonna pick just vanilla or chocolate. Come on.
So did someone online not get your vote in?
All good here.
Yeah, same with me.
Mine still, I put my vote in and it says presenter hasn't changed slides yet.
Same
Okay,
here.
we've only got 8. I'm gonna move to the next one, just, we'll see if we have a similar problem. So this one is, you prefer to have a dog over cat, support, not support, or abstain.
Prefer to have a dog or a cat, that's easy.
For some. Right, we have 8. Someone drop off. I still got the 3 members online. Is anyone who wants to vote not able to vote?
No,
No,
you're
we
okay.
got 9. Dogs are 5 support, 3 is not support, and there's 1 abstain. Okay, so this one's a little bit easier. This is the organization you are representing. Actually, we should have. Perfect, all but Virginia Sea Grants by itself is 0. Okay. Now we're up to you, sir, or one of you all, to call the motion, the second discussion and vote.
So I call a motion. Anybody got a motion to vote on the first recommendation?
One second.
So moved.
Second.
Sorry. Yeah, whatever.
All right,
Any discussion?
all right, go ahead and vote.
All members of the committee vote in recommendation of R-A.
Awesome. Moving on to the second recommendation, R-B. Do I have a motion to vote on it?
So
moved.
All right, thank you. Second.
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 Thank you. All right,
Discussion?
no. All right, go ahead and vote.
All members of the committee vote in support of recommendation R-B.
Moving to R-C. Motion to vote on this.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
second,
Thank you. Any discussion? No discussion, please vote.
All members of the committee vote in support of recommendation R-C.
All right, R-D, moving to this recommendation. I have a motion to vote.
Motion.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Awesome. Any discussion? All right, hearing nothing, then on to the vote.
All members of the committee vote in support of recommendation R-D.
Thank you. All right, last recommendation, R-D. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. I guess that's a motion to vote. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing nothing, please vote.
All members of the committee vote in support of recommendation R-E.
All right, we got the voting done. I'll turn it over to DCR for the action items and scheduling.
Just closing out, the full TAC meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 13th, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's gonna be here at Patrick Henry Building in the East Reading Room. So if you are able to attend in person, that's great. If not, there's always a virtual option. It is our last TAC meeting, the Coastal Resilience TAC. Look forward to seeing you all there, and it's.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Some work getting into recommendations. That's good. All right.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Thank you and congratulations to the team for getting everyone to consensus.
Thanks. See ya.